It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Welcome to The New Next, a podcast that addresses current events and how they will impact the future. From a non-biased partner here, what I see is two old narcissistic men thinking about themselves and their legacy before they die, fighting over BS, the same fight that they have in these country clubs, and overlooking a lot of the basic issues that are very easily solvable if you can aside the disagreements and focus on uniting together around commonly agreed upon things that are positive for everybody.
I don't think it's any different now than it's ever been. But that being said, there's two things that I still think we do it fairly well in America. The same issue in other countries, I believe, is much worse in many ways because we have a lot more freedom on some of these disagreements and whatnot that are not available in the same way for some of the other countries that deal with some of these things. Like you mentioned France earlier.
Strong institutions.
So I'm not like completely down on it. Everything is completely hopeless. It's better than it was 10 years ago, which is better than it was 20 years ago, which is better than it was 30 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't mean it's where it should be. And I don't personally want to take it like, oh, your friends are horrible people because
No,
they
they're
might be
great people, I believe.
Well, what I'm saying is just because they might be participating in the system that is corrupt, it doesn't mean that they're corrupt just because they're in that system. I don't believe that's ever a fair thing to do to people.
I don't feel the system is corrupt, frankly, either. Maybe that's something that we disagree on.
I didn't say the system's not corrupt, but politics right now is corrupt. And
Yes.
if they're dealing with politicians, then they're dealing with corrupt things. Doesn't mean that they're corrupt, and they might be doing as honest as they can for their business or whatever their specific thing is. I don't know them. They're more than welcome to contact me afterwards and talk to me about how idiotic I am about this.
Yeah, me too.
And I will be more than happy to have that conversation without judgment either way. I might be a little bit more heated than I am right now, but the things, you don't become president of the United States without being corrupt. Jimmy Carter, who at least in some worlds, well, he was actually probably like the nicest guy in the modern stage of presidency who ended up becoming president, and he was just too nice to be president. No, he still did. To get elected, he still had to do things that were corrupt, specifically corrupt, unethical, things that were malicious, things that hurt people, because that's what you have to do to be president.
I'm so torn on George Herbert Walker Bush too.
He freaking worked for the CIA.
He was also a military hero.
See, what I'm saying is that doesn't. I'm saying the office of presidency, to be elected, you have to be somewhat. And corrupt is the negative spin on it. Is you have to make decisions that this might be the best decision you can make based on the information available, and
to strategically not give your hand away too.
And on top of that, and this is also the reality, and it's something that's why I don't like these kinds of discussions, because people will be like, blah, 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 this or blah, 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 that. And I understand. I'm not like going, oh man, everybody's evil and stuff. But if there's not truly someone that can hold you accountable, so if someone, and this is why Biden might get some slaps on the wrist, but who's going to hold him accountable for the things that you have brought up about him? Because all those other people that would be able to bring it up, it's kind of like your friend who had the DUI. He still did the wrong thing. He
Yeah,
still
I
did the
know.
wrong thing, and he actually got off because someone else did more wrong.
I know it's
And so I think that was a great story and a sad story, because he paid a punishment that was not equivalent to the crime, but because he paid a harsher punishment, he never actually got his due process.
and maybe I hope he doesn't get mad at me for talking about this.
You didn't say named.
Yeah, I don't know why he would, but it also, I think sometimes the system is so harsh that really people need to be punished, but people don't. I don't know. Like, this isn't a good example, but I'm just saying, like, he ended up getting a DUI later in his life, and he doesn't have issues with that anymore because that was a wake up call. But it took maybe a couple more years for him to get a wake up call, and he's super successful. He's a good person, and he like cares about a lot of people, and I think he's generally a cool dude. But you always think about almost enabling it by taking away. It's so harsh that nobody wants someone to be put away for years for a mistake that didn't actually physically hurt someone, even though it's very serious. And
Right.
when you get off it, then it's there. There was one time I got pulled over. I was speeding, and they saw my license, and they asked me if I was Anchor Jensen's grandson, and then they asked me not to speed and gave me back my license. And I feel that a lot of teenagers just want to be like kids and not feel like they're being oppressed. And whether or not it's true or not, when you have cops in a position where they have legal authority over you, that could lead to major consequences. And it like this dynamic of, am I going to get in super trouble, or are they going to let me off? And I'm
Well,
just doing a little mistake. Like, it's a hard situation, but I'm just saying, I don't
but
like,
see,
there's got to be consequences for things.
I the thing is, if you sped, and especially since speeding, this is something I learned way before I ever worked for the state. So I'm not at all giving out secrets or anything that should be unknown. If a cop pulls you over for going less than 10 miles over the speed limit, then you're probably doing more than one thing wrong, because calibrations are still off by enough
Yeah, 7 miles.
that it's going to be rare for them to pull you over for 10 miles.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but rare. And
If you're in a 35 and a school zone.
school zones, those are, like I said, that's multiple. That's another thing altogether. That's not, the law isn't speeding that you're breaking. It's the fact that you're endangering children. But if I go a mile over the speed limit, like I know I'm going a mile over. I'm not talking about where my foot just happened to accidentally hit the gas too hard, or there's hills or something like that.
Yeah.
People know when they're speeding.
Yeah.
And then they go and take it to court. So everybody goes in a 60 mile per hour zone, everybody goes 65 to 70 minimum. And it's considered like you're holding up traffic if you actually go 61 or 62.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, if when you get pulled over by a cop, they should just write you a ticket. It shouldn't matter what your name is on the license.
Yeah, totally.
And the question is, make me want to go, what kind of grandfather is your grandfather? Because was he a good old boy, or was he one of the ones that he's going to be like, how dare you give my grandson a ticket? And it doesn't really matter what the answer is, because it means that the police officer decided not to do their job because of an extenuating circumstance that has nothing to do with you speeding or not, or you
Yeah, I know
drinking or
exactly.
not, or you causing reckless driving or not, whatever, you going into school zone or not. I had the exact opposite thing where I was going 40 in a neighborhood, and the first time I did it, the cop pulled me over, He was kind enough to put me down for a 35 and a 25, but I didn't ask for anything benefit. I had to pay my $110 or whatever for whatever. And then he found out later, like a month later, that my dad had gone to a deputy school with him and stuff. And he told my dad, if I would have known that, I would have just given your son a warning. And I'm like, no, I sped.
Yeah. They have
Don't-
those stickers that you get if you donate to Fraternal Order of Police and stuff, or the highway patrol stuff, put on your car.
You can buy those. You don't have to donate.
Back in the day,
Yeah,
people told me
no,
that there was certain stickers that you would just go buy, and if you got pulled over and you actually were associated to them, they were supposed to let you off. And I was just like, man, that's messed up.
And I have a sticker like that on my car because I work for an agency like that, but I don't do. But I actually probably have gone a lot slower lately since I put that sticker on, specifically because I'm trying to be a better citizen.
Yeah. So I don't know. Since I've moved here, I've personally felt that a lot of the state really operates in a plantation style format in certain ways. Very top down. I've had the city manager here in Norman send me emails talking shit to me about trying to do charity stuff, and all of a sudden he's like randomly like, how dare you do this without talking to me? It's just, what? You talked earlier about that whole corruption thing. I ran into that at Baker Hughes, where it took me like 16 months to basically get this guy that had kingship on these contracts to even let us have this contract so we could negotiate it, because we knew something's wrong. And then 18 months later, it was a saving of $271 million. I fought with this guy, and I'm like, these numbers don't make sense. I literally talked to these suppliers, and they're telling me that these prices are off dramatically, and these other people over there can sell it to us for half the price. Why is it costing us that? And then it's like, how dare you? This is my fiefdom. And you just have to go higher up and remind them that they have a legal responsibility. And if you are wrong and you handle it incorrectly, you're responsible for apologizing for it. Or if you're in my situation where you get to the end of the line for 18 months and they save $250 million a year, you're just like, why would you want to continue being a part of this?
See, here's the other issue. And going up higher only works if action gets taken. And even though resolved is not the same thing as action, like action resolved isn't the same as action taken. And so here would be my fear is you talk to the dude's supervisor or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I'll take care of it. And in your sense, it's resolved because the police are stopped bothering you now. But what's happening is the guy's like, hey, I'm not going to take this up any higher where you actually have anything that you're on trial for. Your job's not in jeopardy. I'm going to help protect you, but now you owe me. And so a new form of corruption's being started at the same time, as opposed to just, hey, you screwed up. Here's the discipline that's appropriate for the actions, and moving on from there. And I like these stories about myself, but I'll tell the other side of it as well. When I first started working a help desk job where we were auditing driver license examiners all across the state, making sure that they're doing their job correctly. And we also, whenever like they had a call in or their customers called in, we resolved those issues. At the time, there was a very legally written document that, like, when you moved to Oklahoma, Matt, to switch your license over to Oklahoma, you had to fill out this sheet of paper. It had 10 questions on it, and the way the questions were asked were confusing at best. If the examiner did their job, you were supposed to initial at the top 5 or 6 lines that had your name and address information, and then you're supposed to answer the 10 questions. Then you sign your name at the bottom. The examiner signs their name at the bottom, stamps it. You take that piece of paper to the tag agency and you paid for it. The help desk job is part of it is to go over that form, make sure that the customers filled out the form right, knowing that the document is skewed in a certain way and that for certain answers to be given, it's given by an examiner as opposed to the customer actually knowing what to write. But that's why you had to have so many years experience before you did it, so you could tell that kind of stuff. When I first started on the help desk, they said any mistake at all, make a copy of it, highlight it, and send it to my boss, who would then send it to the supervisors of the examiners at the different stations. And I had maybe 3 of these in my 3 years of being in the field total, which is really darn good, by the way, bragging it here. And
You're beautiful. I'm
by
proud
the
of you.
time I stopped doing the help desk job, it basically is the only time to turn it in is either if the customer didn't sign it or the examiner didn't sign it. I don't care about anything else because I was turning in such a high rate of paperwork. So maybe 20% of the paperwork that I was going through had basic mistakes or bigger. Then it got down to we only want certain questions are the ones we're caring about and signatures. Okay, so still 10% of all the paperwork was incorrect. And my boss didn't like it because, one, it made everybody else that I was working with look bad because they weren't catching these mistakes. And and again, there's only 130 examiners in the state. So there's no way that I'm better or that only the ones I'm getting are bad and the rest of them
Yeah.
aren't. And especially when you look at other rates of stuff, at the time we were able to rate how fast examiners were working based on how many customers they were doing a day and all this kind of stuff. So even 2 weeks there, I was catching such a high rate that one of the other employees really got upset at me because he thought I was making him look bad. So it takes about 2 months from the time that like when you turned it into the tag agency, it can take up to 2 months for the help desk to actually look through that paperwork. And so I was there for 2 weeks for a month, and this other guy, other help desk examiner, had one of my papers, and I made a small mistake. So this is the 20% mistake. Like they didn't initial something or whatever. And he told the help desk lead, not my supervisor,